This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Welcome everyone to the NWBA Webinar Series presented by ABC Medical. We are very excited to have you participating in tonight's session on event sanctioning and hosting a successful NWBA event. Before we get started tonight, I want to share a few housekeeping items. Firstly, everyone in attendance, we ask that you mute your mic during the presentation to reduce background noise for our presenters. Secondly, if you have any questions, please use the chat box. We'll be monitoring this throughout the presentation and we'll have time reserved at the end of our presentation for questions and answers. If you cannot stay on the entire presentation, do not worry. We will be providing a recording of tonight's session on the NWBA website, which the link will be provided afterwards. We would like to thank ABC Medical for being a longtime partner with the NWBA and presenting this webinar series tonight. Our presenters tonight are Tina Kane, NWBA Business and Compliance Manager, and Doug Gardner, as many of you already know, Assistant Director, Campus Recreation, Adaptive Sports and Recreation, Head Wheelchair Basketball Coach for UT Arlington Moving Mavs, and past NWBA Junior Division Commissioner. Tina now will be presenting the session objectives.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Nia. That was a nice welcome. So as you know, tonight we're going to cover off on our event sanctioning process and cover some objectives that are listed here. So some of the things we're going to cover are the event sanction application, the importance of the event resource guide, and the importance of the quality control system, which is part of the event resource guide. And then just going through the requirements and the expectations of operating and hosting an NWBA sanctioned event. So event directors should read and be familiar with the application process, the resource guide, and all of their policies in their entirety. But through this webinar, Doug and I are going to cover off on important aspects of those policies and the documents that might be confusing. So this is basically our FAQ. So it's a lot of the questions that we've received along the way and through the different events that have been hosted. We want this to be a learning environment. We want to provide you with information so that you can learn as an event director, and for us to learn what might be confusing for event directors and how we can better educate in the process and the policies. So we invite everybody to ask questions and share ideas on best practices. We're just people doing this event hosting as well. So and you guys have done this a million times like Doug has. So if you have ideas, please share them, use the chat, unmute and interrupt us. Anything is fine, it's all great, and we welcome the open environment. So Doug, as you know, has been involved in the organization for a really long time and has done a lot and worn a lot of different hats for the NWBA. And so he's going to be sharing some of his expertise and tricks of the trade. But he also has a unique insight into hosting events. So he hosted the Intercollegiate National Tournament earlier this year in 2022, which was part of the event audit that we did with the U.S. Center for Safe Sport. So he got a little bit of an insight on what is entailed in that, what they look for, and how they help us to be better in hosting our events and to keeping everyone safe. So without further ado, I'll transition to Doug, and Doug can cover off on the event resource guide and the application process.
Thanks, Tina, and thank you, Nia, and thank you, everybody, for being here. It's great to have you here. We want to keep this quick, so I'm going to go through the event sanction application, which is very important for the organization as far as numbers and reporting. So it's on the NWBA website, nwba.org. You go to the members, applications and forms, event application, event sanction application. So NWBA event types. Basically, if you look at the last one, any other type of event a wheelchair basketball event involving NWBA members. So hosting an NWBA game between two teams, series of games, NWBA tournament, which would be more than 2 registered teams, camps and clinics, anything that involves membership of the NWBA. And, okay, event sanction application. So we have sanctioned events, unsanctioned events. Unsanctioned events, event name, director name, event dates, location information, and all of this is good for our reporting. So it's great so that we know what's going on, we know what the organization is doing, and it makes it a lot easier for our reporting and our accountability. Competition information, which would be which divisions are playing, and I know just sometimes we have women's teams, sometimes we have international teams, sometimes we have D3, D2, D1 college teams. So that's what the organization needs to know, and I think Mike is going to speak to some of that a little bit later as far as officials. And then you still have your waivers and all those parts of the reporting and the registration process. The only difference would be unsanctioned events. They're not going to count towards your minimum games, or they won't count towards your standings. Sanctioned events, submit at least 15 days before the event. I got to tell you, I'm bad about that. I know I'm bad about that, and I'm going to try to do better, but 15 days. So planning is important. Be a good planner. Be better than me. Your venue information, your point of contact, location, the amenities of the tournament site. Insurance. You can get a copy of a certificate of insurance from the NWBA. If you're not using the NWBA certificate of insurance, you need to send in proof that your tournament is covered through insurance. At the UTA, it's covered through our UTA insurance. But we also get an NWBA certificate of insurance. So it doesn't hurt to ask for one. You just have to make sure you know how to run a safe event. Team fees, amenities that you're supplying to teams, a copy of your event flyer, event registration form, event logo. Turn all that in with your sanctioned event application. Your officials, volunteers. I know it's really hard to get your volunteers' names in, but get as many as you can. With college nationals, we had people who were doing food. We had custodians, building custodians. We tried to get as much of that information as we could turned into the NWBA. Head official, and then any services to officials and volunteers, hospitality room. What are you doing? T-shirts for your event staff, which I think is a very good idea, and it helps everybody recognize those who are participating in hosting the event. Registration form, the logo, website, all that is on the event sanction application. An approval, all right, once you completed the event sanction application, it has been submitted. Allow 3 to 5 days for review and approval or questions. You'll get an approval email that will confirm an event sanctioned by the NWBA. Only then is an NWBA event officially sanctioned by the NWBA. So that's all part of that 15 days too. Get it in so that NWBA has time to review it. Make sure you're following policy procedures, and then they'll send you an approval. Then you are ready to host your event. Application fees. If you want to reserve event sanction, $25 application fee. You can turn all of your event sanctions in at the same time. If you aren't able to host the event, weather, pandemic, whatever reasons, then your $25 will be refunded. Again, 15 days prior to start of an event. Competition regular season starts October 1st. Competition must be completed for consideration for postseason play as established by divisional guidelines set forth each season by the NWBA. So NWBA, each division post when their games or when their competitions have to be relative to the national tournament, giving all the teams time to get registered for the national tournament, get their information in. So that will be set between the division and the NWBA. Infractions reported to the NWBA Ethics Committee for investigation. Infractions of policy and procedures may receive an imposed fine up to $500 and or competition results be void from NWBA record and post-season consideration. I've heard of one of these, and it was when a tournament official, I believe, was not a registered member, had not done membership or safe sport. So that tournament results were voided. So make sure that you're following policy and procedure. Everybody's registered. Tina is great to work with and looking up, because everybody's going to say, oh, yeah, I've registered. Oh, yeah, we've turned everything in. But check. Anybody who's on a bench, who's on the floor representing your team, make sure that they're registered. All your officials, make sure they're registered. Scores must be inputted on the NWBA website within 24 hours of the conclusion of the event. Yeah, another thing we're bad about, follow-up, especially when you're busy. Like when I'm done, I'm usually moving on. I'm going to do better this year in my reporting, because everybody wants to know, and we need to make that visible. Event directors have access to input scores. So that's on the website. You can input scores on the NWBA website. And I think we'll cover that in the event resource guide later in the presentation. All NWBA events are listed on the NWBA calendar webpage on the NWBA website. Only sanctioned events with completed and approved event sanction application on the file will be listed on the NWBA calendar. List of the sanctioned and unsanctioned events will be listed on the website. So get your tournament on the calendar. Let everybody see what you're doing, and let everybody plan their schedules and their budgets for the season by getting everything on there early. And I've been around the NWBA. Everybody works well together, but we need to do a better job of making things more transparent and more visible and out there for everybody to see. Event resources guide. This is great. If you're new, if you're trying to make your events better, use the event resources guide. And we're going to cover that. It's under Learning and Resource Center on the website. NWBA office is really working hard to get an updated resource guide out for this season. So use it. You may not use everything, but there's a lot of things on there that you're going to go, oh man, I didn't think about that. And they'll be very, very helpful to help you have a better event and help all your teams enjoy the sport a lot better. All right, the event resource guide covers event sectioning process, quality control system, event designation, a checklist, which is always helpful, event roles, your venue, what to look for in a venue, safety and size, processing event results, incident and injury report, which is very important, especially if you're one of those who was injured. So make sure you do your research on that. It's got instructions on your shot clock, your game clock, timeouts for your division, sponsorship opportunities, information that you might want to put out for your event so everybody can see. Maybe that makes other events better. And if you can look and see what other people are doing, that can make your event better too. Awards ballot, game summary. I made some notes here and hope I didn't make too many, but information on parking is always important, especially if you're on a college campus or maybe even a high school campus. Officials forms, Mike's going to go over that. Classifiers, room and travel and tables for your classifiers as well as your officials. Live stream is big now. It's not easy, but it's always enjoyed by people who can come in and watch the games. If you can have a live stream announcer, if you can have a game announcer, t-shirts, safety, introductions of people who are important in helping you have a successful event. Maybe your sponsors, maybe your organizers, maybe your organization that you're working with. Will you have medical personnel on hand? We're at a college situation, so we have athletic trainers on hand, but what type of medical personnel will be on hand? I've seen tournaments that have ambulance service who just houses at the tournament site all day, which is very nice. Chair storage. What are you doing for chair storage? How much space do you have for chair storage? Stats. Do you have an official stats program for the game where people will get printouts of the stats as the game go along at halftime and at the end of the game, and then printouts of the stats? Brackets on the walls always make a tournament a nice event because people then will be out in the hall and spreading out space and looking at your brackets for the event. Recognizing your sponsors, of course. And food. Will there be food? What's the closest food? Like local information like that. And all right. This is where we're going to bring in Mike Woodard, head of officials, and he's got some new information that's going to be important for everybody to know. So, Mike?
Thanks, Doug. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
I want to thank Tina and the NWBA for allowing me the opportunity to talk a little bit tonight. Hopefully I won't take too much time. But one of the most important things that I can stress in what Doug was saying is that all officials across the U.S. Are required to be registered with the NWBA and take their safe sport training prior to working or officiating any basketball games. As Doug said, last year we had games that people played with officials that weren't registered with the NWBA, and those games were considered non-sanctioned games, which basically means those games you can't use as your record game that goes toward postseason rankings. So make sure you get all your officials registered prior to them working. You can always go to nwba.org website, look under members, and when officials register, it automatically populates in the officials tab under the members column in the NWBA website. So you can always go there and check for that. I want to also cover just a few things on the sanction forms. It lists an area where you can talk about you making someone your head official at the tournament. Sometimes you have that responsibility, you know who you have, and other times it's not listed. I would recommend that everyone get a head official, someone that's experienced with the NWBA, and their responsibility there at the tournament is to oversee the officials, make sure they get to games on time, help with any communication issues that you may have that need to get to the officials. They can also answer any questions from coaches, players, or spectators. after their games are over, but they're there to help you and use them accordingly. One of the new things that you're seeing right here on this screen for the first time is that we've started a new process this year. We have 5 new regional lead officials in the U.S. Austin Hendrickson in the central, LaCory Stepp in the east, Matt Schneider in the north, Sarah Sowers in the west, and Gary Piercy in the south. These regional lead officials will be an additional resource to you. If you're having an issue finding officials, which a lot of tournament administrators have, you can reach out to these officials if they're located in your state, and they will assist you in finding officials. They'll also help with any questions you may have regarding responsibilities, rules, anything like that related to officials. The better we can communicate with them, the better this sport's going to be. So I'm asking you to reach out to them with your questions. If you do not receive a timely response, you can always reach me at officials@nwba.org. One of the last things I'm going to speak about real quick is I spoke with Tina last week, and I put together a tournament organizers evaluation form for officials. And what I would like to hear from tournament organizers is more of the non-technical aspects of the officials. When I say non-technical, not mechanics, not rules, those type of things. I want to hear more about the professionalism, the communication, how well they worked with others, and basically were they doing things the way that the NWBA expects. And too many times these things get lost or they're not reported, where officials arrive late, they're not in uniform. There's a variety of things that should concern a tournament administrator, and I would definitely like to hear those situations, as well as when they do really good. When they're doing the things that they should be, they're acting professional, communicating, working well with others. So that evaluation form goes both ways, and we use the evaluation forms primarily to help determine the officials that we want in our postseason. So they are a valuable instrument to the NWBA. Last thing is pay this year. We've talked about this across the NWBA for a couple of years, and we understand every tournament has budgetary concerns and needs, but with everything and the price of gas and everything, we are recommending, it's not a requirement, but we're recommending that all games except prep games this year, that a standard rate of pay, a recommended rate of pay is $70 per official. If it's a prep game, then it's $60 per official for a prep game. Just a reminder, Division I games are required to use 3 officials. All other division games, you only are required to use 2 officials. So just keep that in mind. But if there's no questions or anything else, then Doug, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Mike. That's great, and I think very helpful. And I want to add that treat your officials right. Like nobody's getting rich calling wheelchair basketball games. They're out there because they love the sport, and the more you can build your officials in your area, the more tournaments you can host, and the better tournaments you can host. I love it when I go in we have an officials room and they're talking about path theory, and they're trying to get better, and they're wanting to go out and work camp, wanting to do a good job. So to me, it's very important. We can't have great games and we can't have a great sport in our area if we don't have great players. And it's important to me that we treat our officials right. I think we're at a good spot. So Tina, I think we're back to you.
Yep. Thanks, Doug. Thanks for covering all of that. And thanks, Mike, for jumping in and giving us some insight on the officials and some of those changes that are coming up. I think it's helpful to cover all of that and know that we have you as a resource still. So thank you for all of that. So I'm going to dive into a little bit more of what Doug mentioned before in the event sanction application. So as a continuation of that, once an event is sanctioned or approved, there's follow-up emails that are sent with additional information referencing the event resource guidelines, a letter to provide information about floor officials, and a reminder to the event directors that they must submit an individual registration. So this slide covers a little bit about that. It's a requirement that we have in place because of our minor athlete abuse prevention policies, or our MAP, as well as our background check policy. And that's a requirement because event directors have authority over athletes and minors, which is what the part that makes it required for event directors to be registered as a non-athlete. Most event directors are already registered as a non-athlete, as the many other hats that you wear within the organization. So for most people, that's a pretty simple thing. It's just checking an extra box, but just ensuring that that's part of the process. So the photos there included on that slide just show where that individual registration can be located, which most people are familiar with, but from the NWBA.org main page, it's clicking on members from the horizontal menu and then individual registration, and then scrolling down and finding the non-athlete registration. So next, we're going to dive into the quality control system. This is part of the event resource guide. So Doug mentioned it earlier when he was talking through the different components of that guide. The quality control system is an application of our policies at events. So it's an implementation of all of our policies, but mostly the MAP, so the minor athlete abuse prevention policies, and then the background screen. The majority of the references throughout the event resource guide are outlined on the safety section of our website, which includes the list here. So there you'll find all of our policies. You'll find the U.S. Center for Safe Sports Centralized Disciplinary Database, or the CDD. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's basically where you can check to see if anyone within our organization or any organization within the Olympic and Paralympic movement has been sanctioned by the U.S. Center for Safe Sport and is not eligible to participate in any event. So it's a great resource to have and a great link to save in your favorites. That website also has signage and flyers. So we have examples of things that can be used for different events. They're already put together, so you can download them and use them for your events. The training information, both for required and optional training options with the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, are on that website. The other thing that you'll find there are the minor consent form templates. So as part of the MAP, teams inclusive of minor athletes, so if you've minor athletes on your team, need to collect the appropriate consent forms for the minor athletes, obviously getting consent from parent or guardian for them to be involved in different interactions as part of the MAP. So teams can use their own, but there's also templates that are posted on our website that team reps can use. Those aren't required by event directors or the NWBA to be collected, but they are required to be provided if they're asked for. So this photo at the bottom just shows where that piece is on the website, going to the safety section on our website. So the next part we're going to dive into is the participants. So this is a part of the quality control system. And the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about the different types of participants. So the group that's outlined here are the adult participants that are required to have a verified complete registration within 10 days prior to the first competition of an NWBA sanctioned event. So it's really important that we encourage individuals to submit their membership registration as early in the season as possible. for a number of reasons. One, to verify that they're eligible to compete, for athletes, that they've completed safe sports training, that they've paid for their membership, that they're affiliated with the team, that they're listed on their roster as they're supposed to be. And then also for non-athletes, it's completing that background check. So those can take up to 2 weeks to get back. And if someone doesn't have a past background check, they're not going to show up on a roster. And that means they're not eligible to participate or to sit on, to be at an event with their team. So it's important to get those registrations done as soon as possible. So this is a list that is covered in the event resource guide. It's also a part of our map, but it basically just outlines all the different categories of people that are required to have that registration on file with the NWBA, complete safe sport training, and then for the non-athletes to have the background check completed. So the next list on the next slide is the list of the participants who may have regular contact or authority at an event. So this is kind of a, if you have them, then they may fall into that category. The group here includes independent contractors. So if there's an independent contractor, like a position like mine, where it's somebody who's coming in from the NWBA and helping out with the event, and they have regular contact or they have authority in their position, then they need to complete all of the requirements as a non-athlete. If you have an NWBA independent contractor that's an accountant that's never going to have any association with the event, then they don't need to. So it's just dependent upon what their role is and what part they're playing of the event. If you ever have questions about participants at your events that you don't know if they should, what level they need to be completing training or completing registrations, feel free to reach out. Happy to answer those questions and give you some insight on who needs to complete that. So on the last slide of our participants section, it's basically an example list of the individuals that tend to be participants of an event that are only required to receive the policies and reporting communication and checked against the exclusion list, which is the CDD list that we talked about before. So this group of example individuals listed here are not required to complete safe sport training. They're not required to be a member of the organization in order to be a part of the event. This is just an example list. It's just a kind of what we've seen at different events of things, of people that have been involved. So it's important to understand that this group doesn't have regular contact or authority over athletes that are minors, but they're going to be a part of the event. So ensuring that they understand those policies and the options that are available for reporting is really important, because they can help in driving a culture of safety at your event. So it's just an extension of making sure that people are aware that there's ways to report. If they see something as they're walking around the facility that isn't right or it's off, they have a way to report that. And just so that they know that those resources are available is really important. So shifting into another part of the quality control system is the roster verification. So Doug talked a little bit about this when he was going through rosters, and Mike spoke a little bit about this when he was talking about the officials, but the rosters that are posted on the NWBA website are how event directors can confirm that participants are required to submit a membership registration, complete safe sport training, and or the background screens for non-athletes are in fact compliant with all of the requirements. So if you're listed on the roster on the website, you're good to go. So as event directors, as you get, registered people coming in for your event, or you're getting confirmations of teams that are going to show up at your tournament, this is a way for you to go in and verify that they're all compliant and that they are registered as an official or they're registered as a non-athlete. They can sit on the bench with the team. And then also confirming that all the athletes that are supposed to be registered with the appropriate teams are. So the screenshot at the bottom shows an example of the rosters that are posted on our website for a team. So it's basically just going into the nwba.org, from the homepage, clicking on that teams tab at the top, and then going into teams by division. That black box on the right there is just highlighted because you can switch between different seasons. So it's just important to ensure that you're on the right season, that you're on the current season and verifying rosters. And then as you scroll down the page, it'll show you all of the athletes and non-athletes that are registered with that team and rostered with that team. And like I said, if they're on that list, then they're all good to go. If they're not on the list, then there's an issue with something. So if you have questions about how to find any of the other links, I'm happy to show that. I'm happy to share my screen at the end during the Q&A, or if you want to reach out specifically to me, that's fine. Most of it's pretty self-explanatory of where to go on the website to find those rosters, but if you get stuck or have questions, you can always reach out. So the next part of the quality control system talks about communications. So communications to the event participants and the team representatives. There's email templates that are included in the event resource guide. So there's some samples in there that you can use of communications that should be sent out in advance of the event that cover the policies, that cover how to report. You can also print those and provide those day of if you have day of participants like volunteers or other people that are going to just show up day of. Just making sure that they have that information. Everybody typically has like a check-in desk for, you know, whether it's teams or volunteers or officials, whatever it might be. So it's just good to have those, you know, email templates there and some of the signage available for them to reference. So then going into the signage, we encourage all event directors to post signage around the venue, focusing on areas that are well populated so that people see the scan codes of how to report, or they see the map at a glance document so they can know what the policies are, but then also just marking areas that are going to lead into an area that's not observable or interruptible. And that's a big key phrase in the map, in the minor athlete abuse prevention policies, is being observable and interruptible. So just applying that to the way that you put signage up in the event is important, just making sure that people are aware of stuff. So some examples of that are listed there: entrances, team check-in, like I talked about, storage areas, restrooms, changing rooms, that sort of thing. We also have that signage, like I mentioned before, it's listed on our website and it's downloadable from there. So you can use that map at a glance flyer, which is really nice for volunteers that you have coming day of. It's a quick snapshot. It's like a 3-page document that covers what's in the map. And it's a quick read for them to look through while you're getting them checked in or getting them their credential or whatever. They can read through it. The restroom and locker room notice is there. The training room flyer is available on the website too. And then the map and the reporting links with the QR codes flyer is the example that's listed there on the slide. So it's just a quick, easy print that you can pull off of our website and put up at your events. The scan code is great. It just pulls up right on your phone and has a direct link into where you report if they have a concern. And so putting these flyers up at your events are really helpful. So the last piece of the quality control system that I'm going to cover is the risk assessment. So this is just about, it's just eliminating the vulnerabilities and applicable risks. And so the bullet items that are listed here, the one-on-one interactions, the massage and athletic training, the communications on social media and messaging, and then the local and team travel are different components of the map. So it's just making sure that people are following them, making sure that you're checking for areas for potential risks. You're sending, you know, you're going out and walking the facility, or sending a volunteer out to walk around and make sure that there aren't people doing stuff in locker rooms that they shouldn't be, or there aren't, you know, there isn't things going on that are, you know, inappropriate on any level, whether it's, you know, bullying or anything like that, like anything that's going on that just seems off. So just monitoring that. There's a piece in here about the communications, making sure that communications are not sent directly to minor athletes individually. So that's a big piece that we've found recently that we need to do a lot more education on, making sure that that component of the map specifically, that people understand what it means. So if you have a minor athlete that's, you know, texting you or messaging you on Facebook or whatever, asking a question about an event, you can't respond directly to them without copying somebody else, whether it be their parent or their coach or their team rep. Even if they contact you, you know, directly or individually, you can't, as an adult participant, respond to them directly. That's a violation of the map, and a lot of people don't understand how that works and why it's important. There's a lot of offenders within the U.S. Center for Safe Sport that have found that's how they groom athletes. They get them one-on-one and talk about event logistics, or they talk about team things, and then, you know, it kind of trickles down from there. So that's an important aspect. The other important aspect is the local and team travel. So just making sure that anyone who's traveling with a team is registered with that team. So if they're going to show up at your event, they need to be registered and a member of the organization and have completed all the requirements to be in compliance with all of our policies. And again, it's just going to go back to checking those rosters and making sure everybody who shows up at the event is, you know, is registered. The other piece that Doug talked a little bit about was making sure that, like, staff for the event have a shirt or are somehow designated for the event. The other thing that I'd recommend is have credentials or wristbands or something that can identify participants of the event apart from non-participants, so like spectators. Just having that designation makes it a little bit easier to know who you're tracking, who you're following, who should be in places that they are or aren't. It just helps you as an event director to kind of monitor who's where and making sure you have a really good pulse on the event and keeping everyone safe. So that's all the content that I have. So I'll turn it back over to you, Nia.
Thank you so much, presenters. Thank you, Tina, Doug, and Mike, for sharing that important information. Now we are at the section for general questions and answer portion of the webinar. So if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and to ask your question, or if you're a little shy, you may type it into the chat and we would love to answer those.
So I think there was a question in the chat about finding emails of the team representatives on the NWBA website. And I think, is that question asking about, like, specific contact information of the team representatives?
Yes.
Yeah, so each of the team roster pages, so if you go to the NWBA website, go to the teams and then teams by division. When you get into each individual team page, so it'll have, if you scroll to the very bottom, it has the contact information for the team representative assigned to that team or whoever registered with that team. It'll have that contact information. We usually put email and phone number there for all of the team reps.
Well, I was looking last night and I couldn't find any email addresses. So I have to reach out to Buddy Barnes to get that information. I wanted to send out an email to some of the teams out here on the West Coast so they could, you know, be a part of this webinar. But yeah, I just couldn't find any of that information. There were phone numbers. Yes, you're right. There were phone numbers, but I didn't find any email addresses.
It's not listed as an email address. That might be a little bit confusing. So when you go into the bottom of the page, there's usually a little envelope to click on, and it doesn't typically have, like, their email address just listed there. But if you click on the little envelope, it'll pull it up as a two box in your email address, in your email drafts. It'll create a draft for you. We have it listed that way on our website because it helps with spam. It helps to block people who are trying to go through different websites and pull email addresses off. So that's a little bit confusing. But if you need help with it or can't find any of them, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to send that stuff to you.
Tina, I wanted to add for looking at hosting, and we learned this. Checking lanyards or checking tournament, anything you have to identify your people, because it's really important that it's not just the head coach or the event director trying to do all that. It's just too much to do. Get somebody who that's their job. You're adding, you have an awards person, you have somebody in charge of officials, you need to have somebody in charge of safety too.
That's a good add. Thanks, Doug.
We do have another question in the chat. Ryan asks, Mike, what else is typically recommended for officials? We usually do hotels and travel costs.
Yeah, I can address that. Primarily game fees and hotel costs, along with if they're driving, transportation costs. What I recommend most tournaments to do is ask for gas receipts so that you can adequately pay them. If you wish to pay them a mileage rate, that's between you and the official. Also, I recommend that at the gym you have a private room where they can change and a place where they can go at halftime that's away from, close to the floor, but away from the crowd. And, it's always helpful to provide water, any snacks. Someone like myself, I'm diabetic, so I need to eat something every couple hours when I'm officiating just for my health. Meals aren't required, but officials always like that. So I guess the best thing I can say is the more you can adequately help the officials, the better the tournament is, the better quality of officials you'll receive. Officials talk. They know which tournaments are very well run tournaments and which tournaments struggle. And, like I said, if you are running a good quality tournament, then you're not going to have a hard time finding officials. I hope that answers your question.
All right. Is there any more questions? No more questions?
I'm
Well,
assuming I can
if
just speak up. Okay, sorry, I was using the hand feature.
go
So I
ahead.
had a question regarding some of the policies as to what individuals required training and those that don't, specifically around the medical personnel. So we typically utilize a local university to get some physical medicine and rehab residents to volunteer their time as like sports medicine personnel on site. And I wouldn't necessarily say that they had any sort of control over anything other than the actual, care that they might provide in an injury situation. Whereas I can see, some training requirements there based on precedent. But I just wanted to confirm that that personnel would fall under required or not required in terms of the training.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's actually one that we're asked quite a bit. And the distinguishing factor with medical at the event is, are they providing care or not? So sometimes there's medical students that come in just to observe, right? So they're just coming in as a volunteer and they're, you know, doing whatever, giving water to the officials, whatever it is. And that's not necessarily when they're required. What it's required for them to complete the training is if they're providing care. So if they're a massage therapist and they are actually providing a service to the athletes or to anyone at the event, then they need to complete the training. And there's ways that we can do that. I'm happy to provide you the resources that are out there that of the trainings that they you know, should be completing. So I don't know if that helps, but the thing to basically that decides it is if they're actually providing care or not.
Okay, great. Thank you for the information. I think then historically we hadn't done that, so it's good to know. And yeah, any resources would be great. Quick question: is that like the safe sport that all of us complete as NWBA members, or is it something that's you know, different?
There is a medical training that basically counts as the same type of training requirement that the rest of us complete. So when you when they would go into the absorb system to basically pick the course that they're going to complete, there is one in there for medical providers. So it's a little bit more specific to things that they deal with. It's relatively new in terms of the trainings that are offered. I haven't heard, you know, good or bad about it, that if it's helpful or not. So I don't know much about it. And obviously I'm not a medical provider, so I haven't taken that training. But there is an option in there for that specifically. So it's good that they provide that resource.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and I see that's a really good question. Thanks for asking that, by the way. And Mike, I see your question here in the chat about in most situations the medical staff applying ice and band-aids and tape and not necessarily massages, and that is providing care. So anytime that they're, you know, working with an athlete, and basically it goes into the reason why it's a requirement, the reason why the center wants anyone who's providing care is because they want the medical providers to know that they have to provide care in an open and observable area. So again, that's that big key phrase that's used in the map a lot. They also want to make sure that medical providers are aware of the reporting policies. Those are the big components. Obviously, they want medical providers, you know, trained in general, but medical is a pretty big area. They also, that's a component where consent forms are required. So any athlete who's a minor that's getting care from a medical professional is required to have a consent form. And so making sure that the medical providers are aware that those consent forms are required is another piece of it too. So that's why the center requires that they all have completed the training. I don't know if that helps to answer your question, but I feel like it was a little long-winded, but hopefully it provides some clarification.
We have another question in the chat. Ryan asked if we or a staff/coach on our team is traveling with the team as a medical staff, should we have them take the same medical training?
Yeah, so traveling with the team is another important part of the map. So anybody who travels with the team is required to be a registered non-athlete, which means that they're also required to complete the training and then also required to do a background check. And the reason for that is because the U.S. Center for Safe Sport it's the travel and training policy. So anyone who's traveling with a team, it doesn't matter if you're a driver, doesn't matter if you are the person who's keeping stats or the person who's moving equipment or, you know, a parent that's just helping out with whatever might be needed. All of those categories, anytime someone travels with your team, every person within that team has to be registered, whether they're an athlete or a non-athlete, junior or adult. It doesn't matter. They all have to be registered and they all have to complete the training. The training that they submit or the training that they complete can be up to whatever their role is. So if they are a medical provider, they can complete the medical training, and that does count toward the requirement. So they can complete that training as part of the requirement of being a non-athlete. Does that help answer your question, Ryan?
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. And I know I'm getting a little off topic. I know we're touching on a lot of like team representative type things, and instead of kind of getting off the track of event directors, but I think it's important for event directors to understand, if we're going to drive a culture of safety within our organization, everybody needs to understand, what the requirements are, what the policies are, how they apply, how you're putting it in place at your event. And also because so many of you wear 5 different hats at the same time. So you are the event director, you are the team rep, you are the medical person. So it's good to understand all of the different things and to understand the why, to understand why we do it and why it's important. So I see there's another question. Do one-day doubleheaders that we want to count toward the team's overall season record need to be sanctioned through the same process as the tournament that we would host? The event sanction application plus the $25 fee? I believe the answer to that is yes. And I believe that there's infrastructure now built into the event sanction application that Brandon just helped us implement into that application that allows you to cover off on that, where you can select different dates as part of one tournament. So it's paying one fee, but having the different games on different days. Yeah, so Mike put in there, it's considered a series of games. And that's an update that we just recently did. So, lots of good questions, you guys. Keep them coming.
And again, feel free to turn off your mic if you have any questions, or put them in the chat for our presenters to answer these questions for you guys.
Doug mentioned live streaming being a great addition. It's something that we implemented into our D2, D3 tournament in March, the River City Slam. We were lucky enough to have access to some iPads and some decent Wi-Fi, but we utilized a free mobile app called SportCam that it actually populates a live scoreboard, and then you can log into your Facebook or YouTube account for your organization or your personal one, whichever one your team sort of follows along with, and it streams it directly to that social media application with the scoreboard. So you're not constantly updating people on the score or panning over to the scoreboard or trying to commentate and wear other hats. It kind of allows you to just do the score, keep yourself on mute, or just keep the game audio, and you can commentate as you wish, but it allows you to kind of at least handle the score part, which I know can be a pain for a lot of us that are streaming games. I can try to link it in the chat.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great, best practice to share. I think we've had some success with other apps, but very similar to that, where it, provides the scoreboard and it puts that up there for you. And even if it's just game audio, at least people can feel like they're part of the event. So yeah, that's a great resource to have. Thanks for sharing that.
Hey, Tina, this is Mike.
Yeah.
Here's a quick question for Forrest. Hey, Forrest.
Hey, Mike.
With those live stream games, are you able to save those?
Yes. So whether you stream them to Facebook or to YouTube, they'll save as videos on the pages that you stream them on. So you can go to the Sportable Facebook page now, look in videos, and see every single game from our 12-team tournament and that app allows you, and I think it's Facebook primarily that allows you to have concurring streams on the same page. So we were going to try to do YouTube because that's what I was using for our individual games when we were traveling. And then I got to the point where I wanted to do, 3 streams on all 3 courts at the same time on one page, and Facebook was actually the one that allowed me to do that. So important tidbit there. You can also upload your logos in like the top corners for free, and then there's actually break graphics too. So during timeouts or quarter breaks or halftime or in between games, you could potentially sell sponsorship, for those if you are really trying to sell out your event in terms of different levels of sponsorship, and have a live stream sponsor and put that graphic there. Again, it's all free in the app, and I'm not getting paid by them, I promise.
No, I will. I'll touch base with you in the next day or two because we're building a video library for officials, and we're trying to use game tapes, and I'm desperately trying to get a hold of, and the NWBA is trying to get a hold of game tapes that we can use where we can send the whole game to us. We can cut up the game in different clips and use those. So I'll reach out to you in the next day or two and see if that's something that we have the capability of getting done. Okay.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I know the biggest issue with that is just the file size. So that's why I don't really download them. I just kind of link whenever I send them
Right.
to our team to review or to others to watch. I just link it to the video on Facebook, and as long as they have internet, they can watch it that way. But yeah, it is a hour and a half long clip, not really cut down. So I can see the benefit of possibly being able to do that.
Okay. Thanks.
Hey Mike, this is Kelsey from Alabama. We also have all of our game footage saved too. If you want to shoot me an email, we can share it. I've shared it on Google Drive before. I feel like it's the easiest way.
Kelsey, are you taking Cassie's place at Alabama?
I'm not. We brought someone in. His name is Davis Faulkner.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm gonna stay in my marketing director role as of now.
Yeah. Yeah, teams use Huddle, and I know Alabama has Huddle. We're getting off topic just a bit, but I have access to Huddle, and I have access to your Huddle, so I can get
Awesome.
those game tapes, but Alabama won't let the NWBA use them. So they kind of said, hey, you can look at them, but you can't use them. So
Got it.
We have another question in the chat. The question asks, we have a deaf athlete and use an interpreter for him. We normally do not know who the interpreter is for the day or game, sometimes not up until 2 hours ahead. It could be 4 different interpreters a weekend. What should we do going forward with this? I know it is a small issue at nationals with them being on the sidelines. Not sure if anyone has a deaf athlete. If you could please reach out and any resources for what they can do.
Yeah, I think it's kind of different situations for you with having the interpreters. So the piece that's important there to remember is, do they have regular contact? So it's typically not going to be an interpreter that has one-on-one interactions. If they do, that's going to be a separate issue. Anytime that they're touching anything that's within those categories that are covered in the map. So are they having one-on-one interactions? Do they have regular contact with the athletes? And regular contact meaning, like, have they worked with the athlete before, or do they know the athlete from a time before? So if there's an interpreter that's worked with an athlete previously, then they have regular contact. Those are the defining factors of when somebody has to complete the safe sport training. It's an hour and a half long to do core. It's 30 minutes to do the refreshers. And then that would just be something that you have to set up and have them complete before they work with the athlete. So if it's somebody who's traveling with your team, like it's from their home program, or you're getting them from a local area, but you've used them before, if they have regular contact and they're going to somehow have one-on-one interactions, maybe they're gonna be in a classification. Maybe they're going to be with the athlete in doping control. Or maybe there's a situation where they're gonna have to go into the locker room with them, you know, depending on what the situation is. Wherever they have those one-on-one interactions, or where they have you know, regular contact, then they're going to need to complete the safe sport training in order to be with the athletes, with the team. So happy to talk offline on that too. If you want to brainstorm some options and talk through some different things, happy to, you know, help with whatever resources that we might have to help with it.
Yes, and it's getting close to the end of our presentation. So again, if you have any questions for Tina or Doug, their emails are listed above, so feel free to send them questions if you have anything particular about this webinar series. So thank you all for your time and taking out time to your busy schedule to participate in this installment of the NWBA Webinar Series presented by ABC Medical. The video recording of tonight's session will be posted on the link listed here by the end of the week. Our next webinar, titled Navigating Team and Individual Membership Registration, will be hosted on Wednesday, July 27th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. We hope you had a great evening, and we hope you have a successful season. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, presenters.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everybody.
Nia. Thank you, Tina.